When Femi Otedola was 46 years, he decided to venture into oil importation because a diesel supplier he paid to supply 2,000 liters of diesel to his house failed to supply the diesel at the time they agreed. He made some inquiries and found the business so interesting. But he didn't know that there are so many things to any business more than the eyes can see. He got the license to import oil and ordered for about 1 million metric tons of diesel. The diesel was still on its way to Nigeria when oil prices suddenly dropped. It went down from $146 to $34, meaning that whatever Otedola has in that oil supply will not be able to cover for his expenses. Talk more of the cost of the oil. After some days, the oil got to Nigeria and it was time to sell. This time, the aim is not to make profit, but to at least recover some parts of the cost of the oil. Unfortunately, after selling the oil, Otedola discovered that he had lost about $480 million due to this sudden change in oil prices. He couldn't even recover from the shock.
I had two options: commit suicide or weather the storm. And I decided to weather the storm. I took the bitter pill.
When this was happening, Otedola's net worth was still below $1 billion, and he borrowed most of the money he used to buy this oil from banks, which means he has to sell some of his assets and borrow more to pay back the debts. He later sold most of his properties and shares, including his 184 flats real estate investment, and was left with only his house in Lagos, his house in Abuja, his 37% stake in AP, and his office at Walter Carrington Crescent, Victoria Island, Lagos. However, immediately after this oil business disappointment, he lost another $258 million because Naira exchange to dollar went down too. And as he is still sorting out how to pay the loan he took, the loan interest grew to $320 million. He also lost $160 million in some company shares he had before then. All this happened in a space of a few weeks. In this video, we will discuss why these things happened, how he lost his investments in Chevron and Visafone because of this oil business mistake, the singular reason that made him not to end his life, and how he was able to survive. But before then, one of the good ways you can show your support is to like this video and subscribe so that more persons can be able to see the video and learn something new. Remember, Femi Otedola is the son of a former governor of Lagos State, Chief Michael Otedola. According to Mr. Femi, he ventured into business when he started cutting the nails of his father's friends who regularly visited their house. He would cut their nails and get paid some money. That was when he fell in love with business instead of politics. When he got through with school, he joined his family printing business, and that was where he made some money that he used to start up his business life. But as he was about to venture into a business of his own, instead of working for the family printing business, he discovered a gap in the Nigerian banking system and came up with an idea that would fetch him some money without him doing any job. He just found out that the interest banks pay on fixed deposit was about 20 to 35% per annum, which means if he keeps 100,000 naira in a bank for 1 year, he can make up to about 35,000 naira profit without any stress. He then deposited every money he had with him into different banks and decided not to work. To him, the 20 to 35% interest the banks were paying annually could be enough money for him to live on. As the interests were coming in from these banks, he also bought some company shares and was making some money from the shares too. Then, after some years, President Obasanjo took over as the president of Nigeria. When this happened, some of Otedola's family friends who were working in the previous administration left office and the Obasanjo government took control. Before then, during the previous administration, it was easier for him to get fuel and diesel supply for his house due to the connection he had with his friends in government. But as a new government is now in power, that privilege is no more. Then, one day, he got back home in the evening and discovered that everywhere was dark. There was no diesel to power the generator due to scarcity of oil in Nigeria. He reached out to a friend to ask him how he can get diesel supplied to his house. The friend gave him the contact of a diesel supplier who he then paid to supply 2,000 liters of diesel to his house. The supplier promised to supply the diesel in the next 2 days. As they couldn't sleep in the dark, he then moved his family to Sheraton Hotel that evening, hoping that the supplier would supply the diesel in 2 days' time and they would get back home. Unfortunately, the diesel supplier couldn't supply the diesel as they agreed. Even 3 days after, the diesel was yet to be supplied. With that disappointment, and considering that he wasn't into any business then, he thought it could make sense for him to go into diesel supply and make the business better. And as it took him this long to get diesel supplied to his house, that means there are other Nigerians suffering the same issue too. And this is enough opportunity to go into the business, start providing prompt supply, and win over customers. He made some inquiries on how the business is run. He even secretly met the manager of the diesel company he paid for the supply and offered him to work with him to establish a new diesel supply company, but the manager turned the offer down. He went ahead to venture into the business with the knowledge he had gotten. Eventually, he started the business just like a joke. He first of all bought a pickup, got a driver, and started selling diesel to his friends. Then, he was buying about 100,000 liters of diesel and filled them in drums. He would sit in front of the pickup with the driver and go around supplying to his friends and other customers. Even when they go out in the evening to have some drinks, his friends would casually make jokes of him, asking him, "Where is your pickup?"
When we get to the club at night, they say, "Oh, come on, get out. Where's your pickup? Where's your diesel pickup? You know, are you selling diesel to this club?"
But Otedola kept believing that he would transform the business of selling oil in Nigeria. He kept expanding and pushing the business. At some point, he decided to register the company. That was in the year 2003. He called it Zenon Petroleum. This was the birth of Zenon Petroleum and Gas Limited. You may have heard about this company. Then, in 2004, he mobilized some money and bought a storage depot at Ibafon, Apapa, Lagos. By this time, the company was already becoming bigger. He also bought 4 cargo ships and later added 100 fuel tanker trucks. With the new trucks available, supplying to customers became faster than it used to be. This also drew the attention of some big companies in Nigeria. Gradually, the company became the supplier of diesel to most of the major manufacturers in Nigeria, like Coca-Cola, Dangote Group, Nigeria Breweries, Unilever, Cadbury, Nestle, Guinness, including the new telecom company in Nigeria then, MTN. The new depot at Ibafon immediately became an advantage. It made the company's storage capacity grew to about 147,000 metric tons, which means they can now have more diesel readily available and be able to supply their customers anytime they need some. Remember, one of the major targets of Mr. Otedola in this business was that he needed to make sure that his customers get diesel anytime they want. So, with Zenon now the major supplier of diesel in Nigeria, it was time to go into fuel supply. Mr. Otedola approached 9 Nigerian banks and took a loan of $150 million each from the banks, including a French bank called BNP Paribas, which brought the total number of banks to 10, and the total loan amount became $1.5 billion. Before then, through Zenon, he bought 28.7% stake in AP, African Petroleum, and had also invested in Zenith Bank and UBA shares. In 2007, with the $1.5 billion loan he took from the banks, he built a 30,000 metric tons fuel storage capacity and also went into kerosene supply. The time was already set for Zenon to become the major supplier of both diesel, kerosene, and fuel in Nigeria. What started as a pickup supply is now drawing global attention, and it was also time to go into oil importation instead of only supply. Customers' demand was becoming higher too. He then applied for an oil importation license and started importing oil in large volumes. Unfortunately, in 2008, in one of those importation trips, he ordered for about 1 million tons of diesel, which is around 1.1 billion liters. While the diesel was still on its way to Nigeria, there was a global fall in oil prices. 1 barrel of oil, which sold at about $146, went down to about $50 and later went to as low as $34. Remember, Otedola bought this diesel with loans. He hoped and waited to see the situation change. But while hoping and waiting, the situation was becoming worse, and the loan period has expired. As he couldn't pay up, the interest on the loan was growing. At a point, it got to $320 million accrued interest. By 2009, the banks were already calling for their money, and because the situation was not just about oil, it was a world financial issue known as the 2008 financial crisis, which started in the United States. It affected every sector of the world's economic life. Even the banks needed back their money to maintain liquidity as the world economy was going down. Otedola called those days his worst days in business. And as you know, Nigeria depended mostly on oil revenue. The country's economy was also not in the right shape. To save the situation, Naira was devalued. This added salt to the injury Otedola was hoping to heal. According to him, he considered ending his life. Before Otedola thought about this, in January 2009, a German billionaire, Adolf Macre, who was one of the top shareholders in Volkswagen and the 5th richest man in Germany, couldn't bear the loss in his business due to this financial crisis, and he took his life. According to Otedola, that was when he considered doing the same thing. As the world economy was in this crisis, the shares Otedola had in big companies were going down too. The interest on the loan was growing. Naira was devalued, and the loan was yet to be paid. The banks were on his neck. The problem was becoming more than what he could bear. He has lost over $480 million in the failed diesel business, $258 million through the devaluation of the Naira, the $320 million interest on the loan, and a $160 million loss in the value of the shares he had, a total loss of $1.2 billion. By 2010, fortunately for Otedola, the Nigerian government established AMCON. This was a hope of relief for his business. AMCON was a means the government created to stabilize the Nigerian financial system after the financial crisis and to resolve non-performing loans. Non-performing loans are those loans that the borrower is yet to pay up more than 3 months after the time he was supposed to clear the debt. So, apart from Otedola, there were many Nigerians in debt during that financial crisis. What AMCON did was to buy those debts and pay part of the money. Then, the borrower will be paying back to AMCON periodically. In Otedola's case, AMCON paid $800 million to settle part of the loan and his other debts, which means Otedola is now owing $400 million to the banks and $800 million to AMCON. But the problem is not yet over. As Otedola is now owing AMCON, it is time to negotiate on how to pay back the AMCON bill. AMCON proposed to restructure his business, but Otedola didn't find that interesting. Instead, he offered to sell his investments, repay what he owed, and start all over again. So, AMCON conducted a valuation of his assets. It was resolved that his 184 flats real estate investment will be sold, including other assets. Then, he was the chairman of Transcorp Hilton. He was a shareholder in Mobil Oil Nigeria Limited. He was the second largest shareholder in Chevron Texaco, a shareholder in Visaphone, and many other companies. He was also a major shareholder of Africa Finance Corporation and many Nigerian banks. All these were used to settle off the debt. Otedola was only left with his house in Ikoyi, Lagos, his house in Abuja, his 37% stake in AP, and his office at Walter Carrington, Victoria Island, Lagos. According to Otedola,
I didn't have a structure. The banks, I also put the blame to the banks, on the doorstep of the banks. All they were interested in was the profit. They were not interested in sustainability of the business. They were short-sighted. So all they were doing was throwing money at me. So they never advised me.
Then, in 2010, with his 37% stake in African Petroleum, AP, Otedola began to rebrand the company, and he changed AP to Fort Oil. Fort Oil became the new hope for his survivor. It was Henry Ford, the famous founder of the popular Ford cars, who said, "Failure is simply the opportunity to begin again, this time more intelligently." By 2014, after pushing Fort Oil to remarkable heights, Otedola bounced back to take a position on the Forbes list of billionaires. He is currently worth about $1.7 billion, according to Forbes. I believe there are so many things you learned from this video, which you can apply to your business and investment life. Why not like this video and subscribe so that you can be getting more? Thank you for being there.